You're watching Saturday Anime on the Sci-Fi Channel.
Greetings, this is Reverend Paul, and this of course is Raw. I mentioned once before that I think the 90s were a great time for OVAs. And the more I think about it, not only were the 90s a great time for OVAs, but I think the mid-80s to the mid-90s were kind of like a golden age for horror hentai. After the release of the 3-part Urusei Doji OVA in 1987, we saw the release of a lot of cool horror hentais. First with a lot of adaptations of other Toshio Maeda properties like Demon Beast Invasion, Adventure Kid, and La Blue Girl, and then later on we saw the release of Guy and the tentacle classic Angel of Darkness. Now what I think is worth pointing out is Urusei Doji really didn't kick off this boom in tentacle horror hentai. It was really The Legend of Lion in 1986. I think it's actually pronounced The Legend of Reyon, but I've said lion my whole life, so that's what I'm sticking with. The Legend of Lion Flare, Episode 1 was released July 14th, 1986, and Episode 2 was released April 21st, 1990. The Legend of Lion was directed by the same director as Guy Awakening of the Devil, Yorihisa Uchida. In fact, a lot of the same production team from Guy worked on The Legend of Lion. Now, The Legend of Lion, this 2-part OVA, was pretty notorious back in the 90s. I remember reading about this in the newsletter that used to come with the Right Stuff catalog, and Legend of Lion was considered one of the most vile, offensive animes in its day. So Episode 1 of The Legend of Lion begins with like the most epic alien penis reveal you will ever see. I challenge you to find a better alien penis reveal in an anime. I'm saying it right here, this is the best one. So we find out that this crazy alien penis belongs to this alien dude named Glode, and he's like a weird looking beetle man. It's a pretty cool design. I really like the creature designs in this show. The rendering looks very cool. Evidently this dude Glode and his horde of aliens, they are on this never-ending pussy quest to find hot babes throughout the galaxy. They're gonna basically take these chicks and they're gonna use their tentacles on them to do horrible things, and then they will ultimately kill them. And if that's not bad enough, they are also going to pillage and destroy all the people and resources on that planet. They're like really horny alien Vikings. So anyway, the first episode starts off with Glode and his men after they have just finished their conquest of the planet Bamuda, which is one of my favorite planets because it's a great vacation destination and it was the birthplace of the Bamuda shorts. Since Glode's pussy quest is not complete and he is still the thirstiest motherfucker in the galaxy, he basically tells his men, we need to set a course for the closest planet that is populated with hot anime babes, which I think is a sentiment we could all relate to. And unfortunately, the closest anime babe planet is the planet Lion. And the planet Lion is home to Princess Flare. And we meet Princess Flare in a very great opening shot where she's naked in the fucking waterfall. I think it's always a good sign in an anime when they introduce the main character naked. It shows that the creators have their priorities in order. What's also worth pointing out, Flare, as well as the other characters in The Legend of Lion, were designed by Toshiiki Hirano. Now, Toshiiki Hirano is a pretty cool dude. He is the creative force behind Ixer 1 and Dangayo. But I think even more importantly, he is one of the co-creators of Vampire Princess Miyu. And Vampire Princess Miyu is a very cool horror anthology comic that Hirano does with his wife, who is also a manga artist named Narumi Kakinochi. Vampire Princess Miyu is a very cool horror series, and the fact that it's written and drawn by this husband and wife team, I think gives it a great balance of like shoujo and shonen sensibilities. Vampire Princess Miyu is written by Hirano and illustrated by Kakinochi. And what I love about Narumi Kakinochi's art is her art really does a great job in conveying a sense of foreboding. There's kind of a haunting quality to her artwork. And the reason I bring this up is because Kakinochi often works alongside Hirano on his projects. She worked on Ixer 1, she worked on Dangayo. So I think it's very possible, even though Kakinochi is not credited as working on The Legend of Lion, that she did have some input, because I definitely feel like the haunting quality that is ever present in Vampire Princess Miyu is also here in The Legend of Lion, specifically in the landscapes. I think think the landscapes are very atmospheric and they are very effective in conveying a sense of dread. I also really love this shot of Glode's ship against the starscape. So anyway, Flare is chilling out naked in the pool with her dragon friend. As Flare is chilling out with her dragon buddy, her friend and trusted bodyguard, I guess, Neris, they never really explain the relationships and jobs people have in here. One thing you're going to learn about Legend of Reyon going forward, there's not a lot of story here. Neris is like Flare's best friend, bodyguard. She, I think, is the coolest character in this two-part OVA, but she tells Flare that she's got to get ready for her wedding ritual because Flare is going to marry this dude, Zeke, and Zeke is kind of a bland dude, but he does have very cool 80s anime hair. So what ends up happening is during Flare's wedding reception, Glode and his army of sex aliens invade the planet Reyon, which evidently only has one kingdom on it, and they basically destroy the whole kingdom, kill all the dudes, and they basically start having their way with all the chicks. And it leads to this robot orgy, and I have to say, I think this robot orgy is the standout sequence in this OVA. It's certainly the scene that stuck with me the most. Like, I think it was the first time I ever saw humping robots. But I think this robot orgy scene is pretty cool. There's plenty of good boob action and cool hentai art. I also like these giant aliens that have like intestines in their chests. They're so weird looking and they don't really serve a point, but that's kind of the whole idea of this anime. It's really just an excuse to have naked girls and monsters breaking stuff, which is always groovy in my book. So the horny robots basically break into Flare's throne room and they have a battle with Neris, and Neris is overpowered by them. And this kind of bums me out because I totally feel like Neris could have beaten these robots, but whatever. The robots beat her, and then Glode comes in, and then Glode basically has his way with Neris. And I think this is a pretty cool hentai scene. It's pretty basic, but I think the staging works really well. This hentai sequence also gives us more shots of the weird like xenomorph cock that Glode has. And like the more this anime goes on, I really think this xenomorph Wang is like the star of the show. It's fucking weird. It's also something you're not going to see a lot in modern anime. Now, as Glode is having his way with the women of Reyon, whatever the fuck this kingdom's called, Zeke is outside. He's doing battle with the henchmen of Glode, and Zeke is one of the most ineffective people ever because he does not save the princess. What ends up happening is when Glode tries to attack Flare, for some inexplicable reason, Flare is able to control the powers of the planet, and Flare uses the powers of the planet to kill Glode. And it really is a Deus Ex Machina ending. I guess spoilers for episode 2, but this is exactly the way episode 2 is going to end. It's almost like that strategy in video games where you just save up your super moves and then you just spam the boss with them to kill it. Like, that's basically what Flare does. So essentially, Flare executes her super move, which basically entails giant stalactites or stalagmites, whichever one, coming out of the ground and stabbing the minions of Glode and Glode himself. After Glode is dead, Neris, Flare, and Zeke, they escape to safety, and Flare has been drained of her powers. Zeke realizes the only way I'm going to be able to help Flare is with an epic boning, and Zeke and Flare kind of reenact that scene at the end of Life Force with the crazy light show, and everything is pretty cool. Now, the second episode opens with a narration from Glode, and what we find out is Glode isn't really dead. His consciousness is still alive, and he is getting stronger from all the negativity that is occurring on the planet Reyon. Now, what I do love about this narration that Glode is doing in the beginning is that there's a little bit of like revisionist history happening. Glode is basically saying it is his mission to get the power of Flare and to finally make Flare's power his own. In other words, this motherfucker is trying to act like he wasn't a dude traveling the galaxy, desperately trying to get laid with any girl he could fuck. He is trying to pretend he was always on this quest for ultimate power. I think what's going on here is that people are giving him shit for sweating Flare because he never got to bang her. And so now he's trying to act like he's not obsessed, and he's just like, no, dude, you don't understand. This bitch's pussy has magic powers. It's like, yeah, sure she does. Sure, it's about the power and not you being a horny fuck. In other words, what my man is trying to say is this chick has the power to cure his blue balls. Now, being that there is only one kingdom on the planet Reyon, Flare and her buddies were able to rebuild the kingdom pretty easily, and they're chilling out, having a party. Everything seems to be going good. Meanwhile, Neris is in the old kingdom of Reyon in killing the remaining forces of Glod's army. What ends up happening is Neris's brother Eon, he has these visions that something bad is happening to Neris. So what he ends up doing is he goes to the Old Kingdom, and in the Old Kingdom, a giant evil demon castle has arisen, which is very cool. What I love about the interior design of this environment is it kind of reminds me of the ending of the first Contra. It has that very cool Japanese anime meets H.R. Giger feel. Like, I really love that aesthetic. So once Eon is in this environment, he is now attacked by the remaining consciousness of Glode, and he's like this weird like demon fetus, and he possesses Eon's body. And if that's not bad enough, Glode sends out his forces to kidnap Flare, and they bring her back to his alien sex dungeon. I think this is a really cool shot where Eon comes out of this weird vagina chair that I guess Glode was living in. Now, unfortunately, things are gonna get pretty bad for Flare, because what's going to happen is Glode is going to use Eon's body, and he's going to attack Flare, and he's gonna get the sweet action he so desperately missed out on the first time. And we know this is not Eon attacking Flare, and it's actually Glode in his body, because Glode's crazy alien wang makes an appearance again. After Glode succeeds in taking some of Flare's power, he's able to control more of Eon's body, and then he kind of morphs Eon into this like hentai Jedi. And I think hentai Jedi is pretty badass. Hentai Jedi is an evil dude who presides over tentacle porn. And what I really think is worth keeping in mind, these hentai sequences predate the Urusei Doji anime and the Blue Girl anime. Legend of Lion pretty much set the standard for the way all tentacle sex sequences were going to be depicted in anime. And as an early example, I think it does a really great job. I think the poses in here look really great. It really doesn't get any better than tentacle porn scenes that feature characters designed by Toshiki Hirano. I think anybody who has seen Extra One can tell you, Toshiki Hirano knows a thing or two about a thing or two about a thing or two about hot anime babes. I mentioned before in my review of Guy, I really love the way the animators use black to indicate shadow in these old school OVAs. I especially love the use of black in these hentai sequences because the heavy use of black gives these sequences a very graphic quality. And when I say graphic, I don't mean like explicit, I mean graphic in terms of visually graphic. It has this very cool, flat comic quality, and it really makes these sequences feel like a living manga. It just goes to show that you don't need blur effects or fog effects. You can keep things flat and comic booky and get an even better effect. Once Glode basically, I don't know, sucks Flare dry, he's able to resurrect his full body. Suddenly Zeke and Neris show up, and what I like about the second episode of Flare is that it has an action sequence, and we get this cool fight sequence where Neris, my favorite character, gets some moments to shine, Zeke gets some stuff to do, and what I really like about this is that Neris saves the day by killing the fetus that is possessing Eon. But because Flare's name is in the title, we gotta make sure Flare comes off looking strong too, so Flare's gonna do her fucking limit break, and Flare's power destroys Glode's evil castle, and then Flare and Zeke celebrate naked, and everything is right with the world. Even though The Legend of Lion is very light on story, I think it works as this epic fantasy adventure, because at its core, it is just an adult fairy tale. The Legend of Lion is no different than any moral play or creepypasta you might come across. It is a story about the fear of the unknown. It is a story about an unknown evil coming into this community and then destroying that community. And even though the community was able to come together and defeat the evil, the ignorance of the young once again led to the resurrection of that evil and the further corruption of the community. And I think it's very funny that back in the day, The Legend of Lion was considered one of the most offensive animes, because at its core, it's a fairy tale with a very moral story. The bad guys are punished in the end and the good guys win. I believe The Legend of Lion was very controversial when it was first released because there were people who took issue with the tentacle porn sequences. These people felt as if tentacle porn sequences in The Legend of Lion were glorifying sexual assault. But I don't think that's a fair criticism because, as I mentioned before, The Legend of Lion is a fairy tale. It is very clear from the beginning this story takes place in a fantasy world with fantasy creatures, and those fantasy creatures are then punished in the end. So I think it's fair to say anybody who walks away after watching The Legend of Lion, they're not walking away thinking being assaulted by an alien is good. I think they all understand that that would be pretty fucked up. I think the thing people don't realize, or maybe they're too afraid to admit it to themselves, I don't think humans human beings today are that different from their caveman ancestors. When you really think about it, a lot of things that exist in modern society are just stand-ins for things you would expect fucking cavemen to do. Like, organized sports is pretty much just a modern version of tribal warfare. You have one tribe going against another tribe to figure out who is the strongest of the two tribes. And rock concerts are pretty much just the modern version of decadent orgies where people just get really wasted and fucking listen to loud music and you make out with someone you regret making out with. And everybody there is in praise of their god, and the modern gods are pop stars, celebrities. So in that regard, I think The Legend of Reyon fulfills a function. The Legend of Reyon exists because whether we want to admit it to ourselves or not, human beings are still intrigued by the darker aspects of the human experience, and horror hentais like The Legend of Reyon allow people to indulge in those ideas safely and comfortably at home. And even though The Legend of Reyon is light on story, I don't think writing it off as a piece of trash is fair either, because it is a moral story where the bad guys are punished, and there's somewhat of an ecological theme going on too, where the purity of the planet is linked to the purity of Flare, and Flare is able to save the planet by channeling the power of herself through it. The Legend of Reyon has this weird, like, ecological pro-body autonomy stance. No pun intended, it is a hentai that is much deeper than you think it is. It has really great art. It's definitely an anime that is not phoning it in. It is trying to be more than it is, and I think it succeeds. I think it's a very interesting OVA series. Certainly not going to be for everybody, but if you're somebody who's into this sort of thing, I don't think you're going to be disappointed. This week's question comes from Aiden, and Aiden writes, "What do you think of Black Lagoon? Do you have a favorite anime studio? I'd also like to say thank you for answering my previous question." Well, thank you, Aiden, for sending me a question, and you're very welcome. I'm always very grateful that you guys send me questions. It's very nice that people actually are interested in hearing what I have to say. But with that said, what do I think of Black Lagoon? I like Black Lagoon. Black Lagoon is very cool. What I think is really cool about Black Lagoon is it's kind of doing that same thing that Gunsmith Cats is doing. It's almost taking like a genre that's very typically American, but it's giving us this very cool Japanese twist on it. What I love about Gunsmith Cats is it's this kind of like crazy Japanese version of like an American police procedural. One of the key things that makes Gunsmith Cats really entertaining is just the fact it's Kenichi Sonoda's twisted take on what he thinks America is. And the hilarious thing is that like America right now feels like the Gunsmith Cats universe. It's hilarious and scary all at the same time. And in that respect, you know, Black Lagoon is kind of like an American crime thriller, like mixed up with Hong Kong action movies. It's a very cool series. I haven't really thought about it that much, but just thinking about it now, I'm starting to think that Revi might be the most badass like anime girl with a gun. I'm trying to think of other anime gun girls like Raleigh Vincent, Motoko Kusanagi, Major Kusanagi, Leona Ozaki. Revi seems like the most intense anime gun girl. Like she's almost like Guts, where like she gets into these berserker rages and just fucking blows everybody away. Like I could totally see Revi being in a Guts-esque situation where she's got to fucking cut her own arm off to choke somebody. Like she would totally do that because Revi is a fucking badass chick. I feel like Revi could totally beat the shit out of Raleigh Vincent, and Motoko Kusanagi is probably stronger than Revi because she has a robot body, but I feel like in a fight between Kusanagi and Revi, Kusanagi would probably win, but Revi is is going to do everything she can to take her down with her. So Revi is a really cool character. She's hot, she's intense. So Black Lagoon is very cool. Do I have a favorite animation studio? That's a hard question to answer because there are so many great ones. You know, Gainax, Madhouse, Production IG, Ghibli. There are so many amazing Japanese animation studios that it's really hard to pick a favorite. But I guess if I had to pick a favorite animation studio, I guess I'd pick two. ArtMic and AIC are probably my two favorite anime studios because they're associated with my two favorite character designers. Kenichi Sonoda used to work for ArtMic and Satoshi Urashihara used to work for AIC. And I really love Satoshi Urashihara. I've based a lot of my own manga style off of Urashihara. If the only thing I amount to in life is becoming a bootleg Satoshi Urashihara, I think that's pretty fucking awesome. And I really think AIC is one of the most underrated animation studios. Underrated in the sense that they were once a huge force in anime, and I feel like they're a company that people don't really talk about as much. They made a lot of cool series, like the Cream Lemon series, Gal Force. AIC was the studio behind the Legend of Reyon, which is the anime we just reviewed today. A lot of the cool, like, 90s OVAs were all put out by AIC. AIC is also the studio that gave us Megazone 2-3. And the talent that is involved with Megazone 2-3 is just incredible. Mikimoto, Hirano, Yasuomi Umetsu. Like, there must have been something in the water in the offices where they made Megazone 2-3 because everybody who was involved in making that series is an amazing artist. If I have to pick one, I guess it's definitely AIC, but I'm going to go with AIC and ArtMic. So, I hope that answers your question, Aiden. Thank you for sending me a question. If you would like to send me a question, if you'd like to tell me I suck, if you'd like to make a suggestion about what to review in the future, you could send me an email at studiochojin@gmail.com, make the subject raw, and I will read it on a future edition of this show. So, that wraps up this week's edition of Studio Chojin Raw. I hope you enjoyed hearing about all things tentacles. A lot more cool stuff is on the way, so I will encourage you to subscribe and stick around. So, with that said, this is Reverend Paul saying, until we meet again.